They call Florida the Sunshine State. Well, not today, because Mother Nature has drenched Daytona International Speedway. The World Center of Racing is going to be just a little bit slower today for VP Racing SportsCar Challenge, and it is going to be a good one. The third season of IMSA SportsCar Challenge, 3 different classes this year, and we had a great race yesterday in the dry, and I think we're going to have plenty of excitement today here in the damp conditions. You look down on the grid, pit lane, cars and teams getting ready to go. And what a unique racetrack Daytona International Speedway is for a lot of these drivers. The first time here at this unique facility, and obviously a very famous facility as well. To say you get to run at Daytona is some pretty cool stuff for sure. And the fans, they've got their raincoats on, and they are ready to go. The team's ready to go, too, walking away from the cars as engines are fired down on the grid, and we are getting ready for action here at Daytona. Welcome in, everyone. Thanks for spending the afternoon with us. I'm Brian Till, along with Ryan Marine. We'll have all the action for you here today, and I think, Ryan, with this damp racetrack, action is going to be plenty.
Yeah, no question about it. Challenging conditions, to say the least. We've had waves of rain coming through. The track has dried out at various times throughout the morning as different test sessions have been going on, but a deluge came just a little bit before the start of this race, and as a consequence, we have a lot of challenge with wetness all around this racetrack.
Daytona International Speedway, if you are a race fan, even if you're not, you've heard of this storied facility. Daytona Beach, Florida. Take a look at it. 12 turns, 3.56 miles with the road course. And don't forget, it incorporates the high banking here on the speedway. Turn 1, a really high-speed entry on the brakes hard. Good passing opportunities, International Horseshoe and the West Horseshoe, and also into the Le Mans Chicane. That Le Mans Chicane this year, Ryan, has a very different look to it.
Absolutely. If you're used to watching road racing here at Daytona, you're used to grass on the back straightaway. That's now gone. That's been paved over. And as a consequence, it's a totally different sightline coming into the Le Mans Chicane. But maybe more importantly is the change to the curbing. There are some very punishing curbs at Apex, and if you hit those curbs wrong, it could be day over.
Take a look at the starting grid there on the left side of your screen. 3 different classes, and that's something new this year in VP Racing SportsCar Challenge. The P3 class with the LMP3-based prototypes, but new is the GTDX category. That's GT3-based machinery, and then the GSX category, GT4-based cars. And it made for great racing yesterday. It was like a smaller version of the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship.
Exactly. We wondered coming in what to expect from this additional class, and if the first race of the season is any indication, it's just spiced this series up a little bit more. Managing that traffic now becomes all that much more important, especially if you're in one of these LMP3 cars or in one of the GTDX cars that are kind of stuck in the middle performance-wise of the 3 classes. It was fascinating to watch as it developed yesterday, and now you throw in the dampness, you throw in the spray of racing in the rain, and the challenge today is that much greater.
So before we get to race number 2 of the weekend, let's take you back to race number 1. And like we said, a completely different appearance at the start. The Gebhardt squad up front in LMP3, they get a great start, but for Marcus Palmer, too great a start. He changed columns at the start, and that would be a penalty.
Exactly, 10 seconds. That was applied post-race. That ultimately cost him second position.
Great battles in GSX between the Supras. The 76 of Clemens having a real go with Kiko Porto, but look at this battle between teammates in the LMP3 category. But remember, Marcus Palmer aboard the 31 had a 10-second penalty he had to serve at the end of that race. And good stuff in GTDX.
Yeah, this is that class overlap we were talking about. Good battles for the final podium positions in class, having to work their way through the traffic. That was Samantha Tan fighting with Matias Perez. Compact, little bit of contact there, but both continued on.
Now, where's Calvin? It's supposed to be RG Bargy is what you're supposed to say there, right? But yeah, a great battle between BMW and Ferrari. And for Samantha Tan, that contact really kind of slowed that BMW down a little bit. in the later going, but the checkered flag falls, and for 19-year-old Valentino Catalano, he takes the win by heartbreak in GSX.
Oh, Steve Clemens looked like he had GSX on lockdown, but that car ran out of fuel coming to the end. It lets Kiko Porto through for a dramatic win on debut, and Adam Adelson gets the first ever win in GTDX.
And what a difference a day makes. Look at this weather versus the sunshine we had yesterday. Something else unique for today's race, and that is because of these conditions, the race director has declared that it is a wet race. So all of the drivers, all of these cars are on the wet weather tire, the rain tire from Michelin, and they're also going to do 2 formation laps, but the clock will start at the end of the first formation lap. They just completed that, so the clock is running. We'll go green. It will be a side-by-side start, though, next time by.
But important to give the drivers a chance to get out on track, look at the conditions, get a sense for where there could be grip and where the grip could be lacking to make sure we have a clean start to this race. Prudent by race control to add that second formation lap. But as you mentioned, the clock is ticking, and these already short sprint-style races just got a little bit shorter.
Absolutely, and right now the driver's just trying to figure out where those puddles are on the racetrack, trying to get a read on it, right? Because when they go green, the track was a little damp for qualifying, but this is beyond a little damp, so nobody really understands what the racetrack is like. Right now, you need to take all of this information in. Where are their puddles? Where is the asphalt perhaps a little bit more dull looking, which would indicate it's a little bit drier. It's not really dry anywhere, but I said to a couple of drivers earlier, I loved racing in the rain. I truly enjoyed it, but this isn't racing in the rain. This racetrack will be different every single lap. If we don't get more moisture on it, it's going to change from the drop of the green all the way to the checkered flag every lap.
Constant state of evolution over the course of these 45 minutes. And for the drivers that have already been on track today, remember there has been testing going on for the WeatherTech Championship as well as Michelin Pilot Challenge, and a handful of drivers are doing double duty. So a few of these guys and gals have seen some racetrack conditions similar to these earlier today. Maybe they have a slight edge.
Take a look there. Cars getting ready to go. A.J. Moss on pole in the 66. Man, talk about stories. He qualified on pole for race number 1, but ran afoul of the rules. And it sounds crazy, Ryan, but what did he do?
Well, he got out of the car too soon before the checker flag was out at the end of qualifying. And they were having a mechanical issue with the car, and so there was some confusion going on. He had a time that was good enough to start on pole, but because he hopped out of the car a matter of seconds too soon, he lost his qualifying time for race 1. Now, the good news is race 2 is either set by your second fastest time in qualifying or your fastest race lap. Well, since he had no qualifying times, it came down to the race lap, and who had the fastest race lap in GTDX yesterday? Well, that was A.J. Muss, and it's fast enough to put him on pole here for race 2. Of course, much different conditions, so we shall see if he's able to keep that Ferrari out front.
And he did climb back to second in the GTX category, so a great run for him. But you just kind of think, well, what could have been if I had started up front. Now, I've gotten 2 different stories. Originally, I was told side-by-side start, and now I'm hearing it might be a single file start. Nope, we're lined up side-by-side, and there will be a gap back to the GT categories. It'll start with the GTDX pole sitter, and then they'll fill in based upon class after that. All of the GT cars, GTDX and GSX, will be together. Prototypes up front with a slight gap between the classes. Lights out on the BMW safety car to pit lane. Time to go racing. The 19-year-old German Valentino Catalano on pole took the victory yesterday. He was absolutely ecstatic. He is on the trigger of that Duquesne chassis. Marcus Palmer outside does not make the mistake he did yesterday. Stayed in column formation. They're on their way down to 1. And right now, it's an unknown as they head down there. GTDX doing the same.
Adam Adelson from the outside of the front row, a good start. Goes a little bit wide into turn 1. That might open the door for Muss to come back. But right now, it looks like it's Adelson in the lead. And now we're going to see an overlap. These GT cars, they've got traction control. The LMP3s do not. And the front of the GT field has already caught the back of the LMP3s.
Not only do they have traction control, they've got anti-lock brakes. in the GSX cars for sure, and I believe in the GTDX cars as well. So you're good and stable under braking. You're good putting the power down, and in front of you, you've got these prototypes that have great downforce, but they also have a lot of horsepower, no traction control, and no ABS.
Right, so in these conditions, relatively cold and damp, these first few laps in these LMP3 cars, that's going to be a massive challenge. And you can see the front of the GT field is now starting to make its way through the LMP3s. It's Adelson showing the way, but Muss right there keeping him on as the pole sitter here in race 2 in that red Ferrari.
Now, what did you do to your car when you showed up at the racetrack this morning? You saw the weather conditions. How much did you soften it? How much downforce did you add? Look at A.J. Muss, his Ferrari down low, the green Porsche top with Adam Adelson, the winner yesterday. It is a drag race to the Le Mans chicane, Ferrari versus Porsche.
Oh, how desperate do you want to be here on the first racing lap? Plus, they've got the traffic looming up ahead in the form of the back of the LMP3 field. Adelson plays it really nicely, slots in front of Mirko Schultes. Muss gets balked, but luckily they're able to avoid contact.
A.J. Muss gets balked right there in the middle of the Le Mans chicane. It's okay, put that behind you. You've got just inside 40 minutes to go. A.J. Muss really kind of needs to take stock of what happened there, so if he sees that in the future, maybe he plays a different hand. And here's the frustration for Muss, though, in that Ferrari. LMP3 machine in front of him is going to have better top speed, but he's going to reel him in the brake zone and in those slow power down off corners sections of this racetrack.
And you can see right here where the traction control, the ABS of the GT3 cars is awfully strong. Muss spins out of second spot.
And did he keep it running? And of course the problem is, as you come flying into turn 1, look at the traffic stack up there. Oh, Indy just narrowly avoids being collected. That is no man's land. If you're on the racetrack, Ryan, and you head down into 1, you can't see that car sitting there. What happens?
All on his own.
Yeah, but I think what happens is he gets up behind that prototype, and again, he's expecting it to go, and he probably had to stay on the brakes a little longer than what he wanted to. That weight on the nose of that Ferrari, and he's trying to get it slowed down, and around it comes, and again, just kind of getting caught out by the speed differential between the two classes.
AJ's got to be thinking, not again. He had to come from the back yesterday to get to second. Well, at least he knows he can do it. But, you know, one of our storylines yesterday was the fact that many of these drivers don't have much, if any, multi-class racing experience. And that's really AJ Muss's story to a large degree, and maybe got caught out a little bit there.
See a good battle going on in GSX. Number 4 Porsche, they're trying to put the pressure on Patrick Wilmot aboard the 12 BMW, that silver and blue BMW, and then look at the side-by-side in front. 3 different manufacturers, actually 4 if you include the Porsche as well, and this is what we expect in this multi-class racing, and I think this weather is the big equalizer. I know a lot of people were frustrated with the speed of the Toyota yesterday, but this weather is going to equalize that a little bit.
Liafouche is through. That was on Clemens, who looked set to win yesterday. That's for the lead in the GSX class. Want to update Kiko Porto, who started on the front row in the class. He's dropped back to 6th on the opening lap. There he is, starting to recover, but something must have happened to the Brazilian on the first lap of racing, because he lost a lot of track position.
I think it doesn't take a lot to get shuffled back there in the early laps when everybody's together. You make a small mistake, and then you lose that 1 or 2 positions. Everybody's right there. He didn't spin. He wasn't around or anything like that. You just kind of get shoved out of the way, and 2 or 3 cars slip by. And that's really what I was saying about A.J. Muss. In the early goings, when everybody's discovering the racetrack, someone else may have the same type of problem, as we see a slide there by the 68 in turn 1. You got to keep your wits about you and just focus on getting your head back in the game and not let that bother you. Understand, the 43, that's Greg Liafouche, your leader in GSX, is going to have a drive-through penalty for a false start.
Wow, that's 2 days in a row where start procedure has had a big impact on the race. And you take a guy like Liafouche, who has so much experience. He knows what it's like to race in the rain and have success in the rain. You would think these conditions would favor him, but now he's very much on the back foot.
Yeah, and for Greg, he's a long-time IMSA competitor, so he understands the process. So not sure what happened. It was also interesting. I was looking at Adam Adelson just then and Mirko Schultes, and Schultes, we expect that with these LMP3 cars, especially the drivers who are not professional drivers, gentleman drivers like Mirko. It takes a couple of laps to get the tires up to temperature, up to pressure, to get comfortable with these conditions. And now he's beginning to find the pace again. And this is what multi-class racing is about. He's got to be careful that he doesn't get mixed up in Adam Adelson's race.
Yeah, and I did misspeak earlier. There is traction control on these LMP3 cars, but it's not quite as sophisticated as what you see on the GT3 machines. Your point about no ABS is really the better point to make. But, oh, wow, big slide there for Palmer, who continues to try and chase down his teammate, the race leader, Catalano. You know, Schultes is a guy who's been there, done that, though. He's won Petit Le Mans class in the past, going back quite a few years. Here's Liafouche from the race lead, serving his drive-through penalty. And again, this is for a start infraction, false start called against the veteran Greg Liafouche.
You know, and it's interesting. It never really does you any good to argue because the officials have looked at it and they've seen the replay multiple times. They know that the penalty is there. And the team knows it as well. Let's take a look at the start. Look for the orange Mustang well back here. See what happens. He gets a big run, and there it is, right there. He's moved, he's out of column, and he's alongside before he ever gets to the line. His
column was backing up to him, and maybe he'll say, I was taking evasive action, but I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of sympathy from the stewards.
But when you take evasive action, you don't stay in the throttle and drive by the car that's in front of you, and I think that's probably the indicator that the officials just looked at and said no.
These are the two cars that raced for the win yesterday. Kiko Porta, who we mentioned, was shuffled back on that first lap. He has run back through the field and now taken the lead in GSX. Back around Stephen Clemens. And those Supras have come to the fore. Waving yellow, there's a car off. It's one of the mutuals. I think that's Senior off there just a moment ago.
But this is different today. You see two other cars in this fight for the lead. We did not see that yesterday, so it'll be interesting to see if the Supras have that same kind of pace. Justin Di Benedetto is in there as well in the number 4 Porsche. So he's a part of this fight, as is Patrick Wilmot. And as we said yesterday, Patrick Wilmot didn't even know he had this ride until I think Tuesday or Wednesday when they were able to come up with the funding to get it done. And it's just, I stopped by and visited with him today, and he always has a smile on his face. One of those racers that obviously has talent and can run up front in series like this, but you know, you've got to find the funding to get it done, and
that's the leader.
Yeah.
That's Catalano off track. That lets Palmer through, so a change for the lead.
How did that happen? And I've got a pretty good idea how it happened. I think it was probably on the way into the corner, under braking. We said every lap it's going to be different, and a problem right now for Mirko Schultes in the 70. He's made hard contact. This is going to bring out a full course caution, I would imagine.
Certainly so. Heavy damage, that car into the tire barrier. Still green for the moment, but crucially that happens after the change of position. But Palmer locks up, and Catalano back through to the lead.
Now the problem is it's not as simple as just finding reverse in one of these prototypes. It takes a moment or two to get that done. Palmer now back underway, full course caution now is out, but again under braking, and you think in that situation maybe just turning to the right and not trying to make the corner would have been the better bet, because there's that huge runoff area where he could have made the U-turn and continued. But now Valentino Catalano goes, well, I made a mistake, someone else did. And for Marcus Palmer, he's fortunate, right? Now the full course caution is out. He's back position-wise, but on a restart, he's going to be closer to Catalano than he would have been had we stayed green.
That's a great point. It bunches the field back up, and it keeps him within hailing distance once we do get this incident cleaned up. But how impressive has Catalano been? That one little off notwithstanding, he has been at the top of the time charts all week long. His first ever trip to Daytona, only his second trip to race here stateside after debuting at Road Atlanta at the tail end of last year. And the young 19-year-old is looking right at home on the high banks.
It's so funny, when I was talking to him today, his face was just lit up. We were talking about the victory yesterday. He's so excited. Let's take a look here and see what kind of problems we have. Start with Catalano. This is into the International Horseshoe. Yeah, rear end just kind of steps out a little bit. He does a great job of saving it. He doesn't loop the car, but there's no other option but to go straight. And for Mirko Schultes, man, that was high speed. Same kind of issue for Palmer. There, gets into the corner and he just can't make the corner. He does a good job of kind of opening his hands, keeping the car straight, not looping it and finding the tire wall, but he ended up in a kind of an awkward situation, like we were saying, Ryan. Turning right, as odd as it may sound, into a left-hand corner might have been the better option, but the good thing for him, as we talked about, as we chronicled, full course caution comes out, so while he's lost positions, he'll be a lot closer to Catalano on the restart than he would have been had we stayed green.
He'll close back in, but he's dropped 2 positions down to 4th, and he also has the GTDX leader in between himself and the top 3 in P3. Turner car in. This is Jake Walker. I believe he was unable to start yesterday.
Yep.
They had a big incident in qualifying, didn't set a time, a lot of damage to the car for Jake, and was unable to take part in the first race of the season yesterday. And this looks like perhaps something either mechanical or electrical, most likely, the way they're inside the cockpit working on the BMW M4 GT3.
You know, these conditions, wet conditions, are obviously, I'm not an electrical specialist, but I do know that water and electricity together don't really work all that well. And you look at the sophistication of these modern race cars, and there are a lot of systems in there that, yeah, if they get moisture in them, it's a problem. You talked about, too, damage that was done to that car, and as good as the Turner Motorsport team is, in fact, they were the best privateer BMW team in the world last year. Still, rebuilding a car at a racetrack overnight, it's easy to miss little things here and there. I always laugh and say, you don't see electricity leaking, right? you see oil, you see fuel and stuff like that. So if you got a connection that's bad or something like that, you can't see that until the car's fired up and out on the racetrack. That's
what makes it so frustrating when you do have an electrical issue, because to your point, you can't see a telltale sign of exactly where the issue is. Well, I suppose that is a dead giveaway, isn't it? But it takes so long to check all the different wiring connections to try and isolate the problem. And I talk to mechanics all the time about this. This is not why they signed up to be mechanics. They would have been electricians.
They work on stuff.
Exactly. But it's part of the deal in modern motorsport right now. These cars are so high tech, from the LMP3 class in this series all the way down to the GT4 cars of GSX. These are high tech computers on wheels. And if anything goes slightly amiss in any of those electrical connections, it can cause a major problem.
Brian Till, Ryan Marine with you, VP Racing SportsCar Challenge. It is the second race of the 2025 season. A great run here at Daytona International Speedway yesterday under very different conditions. Damp today, and that difficult driving condition has caught Mirko Schultes out. Significant damage to his Ligier LMP3 machine, and safety crew goes to work. The best thing about this is, if there is anything good at all, is that Mirko Schultes out of that car, walked away on his own power, having conversations with the AMR medical team that is always on site very, very quickly. And so good to see him out, and they'll get that stricken machine out of the way. We'll get back to racing.
Yeah, happy that Mirko's all right, and it looks like that cleanup is nearing completion. The report is that the safety car has been instructed to turn the lights out, which is indicative that a restart is imminent. Potential developing story in the GSX class. Just got word that Kiko Porto has been assessed a 10-second penalty for false start as well. My understanding is that's going to be served post-race, but we're waiting for some clarity there. So this bunching of the field behind the safety car, that is bad news for Kiko Porto. He needs to build as much of a gap as he can to try and mitigate that penalty.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing in the world he wants to see, you and I talked about this yesterday when those 10-second penalties were handed down. More precarious situation today, even if we stay green for the rest of the race, 25 minutes to go at this point in time, the field won't get spread out as much because there's obviously not as much time. the last thing he wants to see is a full course caution at the end, which would bunch the field, and that 10-second penalty would send him to the back. So he needs to focus forward, and we talk about this all the time. I mentioned it earlier. There's never been a perfect lap. There never will be. If you're focused on the corner that you just messed up, I guarantee you're going to mess up the next one. So you've got to, as a race car driver, use emotion to drive you and not to control you. You can be upset with yourself and say, man, I got to get that right the next time. But if you concentrate on it, if it eats away at you, that mistake that you made, you're not going to have the focus and the wherewithal to do what you need to do when you go back to green.
Kiko's been on both sides of the slings and arrows of racing fortune here this weekend. It looked like he had lost the win yesterday, only for Clemens to run out of fuel on the final lap. He comes through for the win, and now he finds himself on the back foot with some work to do to try and preserve a good result in race 2 of the season.
Well, and you look at that young man. He's a former champion in Formula Car Series back in USF 2000, and certainly knows how to win races, and I think more importantly knows how to win championships, because I think there's a difference in that as we go back to green. And I'll tell you what, Valentino Catalano was asleep at the start. The green flag came out. As soon as the flag waves, you can go, and we'll take another look at that start and make sure that everything is on the up and up, but it looked to me like he was asleep.
Lost 2 positions. Brian Thenis is through for the lead. How about Jonathan Woolridge, who had a nice solid day yesterday? He's up into second. Catalano in third, and now we wait to see where Palmer is in this mix. Remember, he got shuffled back. There he is, the purple LMP3. Not a great restart for Marcus Palmer either, and he's watching the top 3 disappear out the windscreen, or at least if he would be if he could see through all this spray.
And what were we just saying about remain calm, don't let it get a hold of you emotionally? That's what these guys need to do right now. We'll see if the officials review the start. I mean, it looked like everybody was in line coming up to us, so we'll have to wait and see if there's any kind of an action on it. But right now, you got to get back and focus forward. Thenis in front, Woolridge goes with him. Catalano goes back to third. And when you think about these restarts, Kyle Washington now in the 32 from GMG Racing is being shown first in GTDX.
What a wild restart. Catalano on the comeback drive now. He's to the inside of Woolridge and makes the pass on the Canadian. We also saw in GSX that Wilmot had driven to the lead. Last we saw him, he was fighting with Kiko Porto for that position. Here's the fight for the lead in GTDX, and Adam Adelson is back through. These two have raced against each other quite a bit at SRO over the years, so they'll know each other well. And Adelson, who qualified on the outside of the front row for today's race, is back to the front of the field.
Back to the front of the field with authority, that's for sure. And we saw the battle up front. Catalano moving forward past Woolridge. That's Duquesne versus Ligier, and now he's looking at Brian Thenis, looks to the outside and drives by him. I think a lot of this is, what did you do with your car? We talked about this. Did you trim it out, or did you load it with downforce? And with the top speed, I've always felt like the Duquesne chassis was a little better in a straight line, and it may just be, Catalano now goes wide. It may just be that they haven't put as much downforce on the 30 and the 31, and we saw that speed differential around the high banks.
Yeah, you might be onto something there. That plays to the strength of the Duquesne relative to the Ligier.
And what did we see in turn 1? Was that lack of downforce related to, as he went, you know, downforce is both a blessing and a curse. When you take it away, it makes you go fast, but when you get to the brake zones like turn 1, you don't have it, and all of a sudden you get in there with high speed and not a lot of downforce on the car. Downforce and braking, we tend to think that it's important for straight line speed and high speed corners, but that downforce with the initial brake application at least is absolutely imperative.
Yeah, definitely. And if that's what they're lacking there, you pay the price into turns like turn 1, but you reap the rewards on the long full throttle sections. Fight breaking out here between Thenis and Woolridge. Woolridge in the silver car to the inside. This is MLT Motorsports Championship team of a year ago.
Now, and this is where we may kind of get a better idea of, do people have different downforce settings? Because you see the 54, that turquoise and silver Ligier of Woolridge to the inside, and it looked like he had a little better straight line speed, but when they got to the braking zone, Thenis seemed to have a more stable car. I got to believe the 77 might be carrying a little bit more downforce, maybe a slightly softer suspension. But I'm thinking downforce-wise, we're about to find out again. Let's see what Woolridge has around the high banks.
This is where Thenis would pay the price if he is carrying the extra downforce, a little bit of extra drag. Battle breaking out here for second. Actually, it's already changed hands as Wilmot is now dropped behind Clemens. And it's DiBenedetto in the Cayman starting to close in on Wilmot, who's looking for a second consecutive podium to start the season. But there's the power move from Woolridge. He's around Thenis and up into second.
Well, that's exactly what we just said, right? I think there's more downforce right now on the 77 car, which is helping him on the infield portions. But where's the run to the checkered flag? It's out of the Le Mans chicane and along that high-speed section there on the high banks. Now the 76 off Clemens with a problem in one.
This is just fantastic stuff, though. This is what we're talking about with the evolution of the track. What he did there might have worked last lap.
Yeah, absolutely.
No guarantee it's going to work one lap later with the constant change in conditions one lap to the next.
And you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, right? I mean, you get down there and you're like, I got pressure on me and need to go a little bit deeper. I think it's probably drier this lap.
Right.
Well, no. And you slide wide and there's competition again. So there's a certain level of risk and exploration that you have to do. The catbird seat might right now may belong to Patrick Wilmot. In conditions like this, at this stage of the race, big slide. Places like this in the race, having a car or two in front of you to go explore,
that's right,
isn't so bad. Send them out there. If you feel like you've got something to fight with last couple of laps, let these guys go explore the racetrack right now.
Yeah, let them go take the risk, and if they make it through, well,
yeah,
I probably can
yeah.
too. And if not, might try something a little bit different. Another fight breaking out here. This is Palmer on the comeback drive after his off-track moment just before the full course yellow. He's made his way back through the GT traffic, and he's right there on the tail of Thenis, going for third on the road.
Duquesne versus Ligier as far as the chassis go. The Duquesne, that purple number 31, the Ligier in the hands of Brian Thenis, and again, top speed seems to be more of an issue on the 77, certainly than it is for Palmer as he drives by pretty easily. But we saw that with Jonathan Woolridge as well. So again, either something affecting the top speed on the 77 mechanically, or perhaps just a little bit more aerodynamics on it to prepare for the lack of grip that the moisture has brought. But either way, it's punishing right now when he gets to the high banks.
Well, you talk about the setup choices the teams make. One thing, too, they might have looked at the forecast and saw, yes, it's going to be very wet at the beginning, but by the end, it should dry out. That's the way things are progressing for. DiBenedetto, let it hang out. Maybe somebody took a risk, too, and set their car up kind of somewhere in an intermediate setting, knowing that it was going to be more dry, at least, when it really mattered towards the end of the race.
Well, let me throw something else at you. As the track begins to dry, we talked about tire degradation yesterday in the dry on the Michelin Racing Slick. But everybody's on the rain tire today. That has been great up until about now. And I'm going to imagine the last 5 minutes of this race, if we don't get any more moisture on the racetrack, 5 to 10 minutes to go, these rain tires may be barking at the driver saying, hey, we're overheated. The tread blocks are starting to squirm a little bit as the track begins to dry out a little bit, and you may have a real handful in the closing lap.
It's a good point, so we'll keep an eye out for drivers to drive offline on the straightaways, looking for some of those puddles to try and cool the tires off. Chris Walsh under assault here. This is in the mid-pack, currently 6th in GSX. Ian Porter, who had a good run going, he is just behind. And how about the recovering Greg Leafouche? Remember, he had the drive-through. That full course yellow was music to his ears. It basically is a reset, and now he's got a chance to drive that rapid Mustang back to the front.
Really, for Palmer and Leafouche, they were the two guys that wanted to see the full course caution. The mistake that Palmer made, that caution helped him as he goes by Woolridge to take over second place. And for Gregory Leafouche, who had to do that drive-through penalty, the drivers who didn't want to see it once again were those who will have time penalties at the end of the race, because it kind of closed that field up a little bit. They certainly don't want to see another one.
That Duquesne chassis just looks so well sorted here at Daytona. It's been an up and down day, but they run 1-2 right now. Meantime, let's go back to this fight. 6th, 7th, and 8th. Walsh in the BMW, Porter in the Supra, and Leofouge closing in the orange and blue Mustang.
Tell you what, the Mustang has some good speed there. Seems to draft really well. Porsche, Supra, side by side. Clemens in that bright red 76. Tell you what, he wants to get back to the front. He wants to make amends for yesterday, and really has nothing to do with him. And I don't know exactly what happened yesterday, but my understanding is in GSX, in this class, there are no fuel capacity limits, so it's whatever the fuel cell is, which means how much fuel do you put in? If indeed it was a fuel situation, I would rather lose a position because I carried a few more kilos and have the points than lose everything because I wanted the ultimately fast race car.
I suspect with the benefit of hindsight, Stephen Clemens and the BSI team would view it the same way. And look, they come back the next day. That's the beauty of these doubleheader weekends. You put it behind you, back on track the next day. This has been super impressive for Stephen, who comes out of Toyota GR Cup, has done a little MX-5 racing as well, all with this BSI team. And to see them make this jump into the deep end here, running at the GSX level in VP Racing SportsCar Challenge, they have really acquitted themselves quite well.
But I'll tell you what, that is doing it the right way. You start with lower horsepower cars, you learn how to deal with your racecraft, you learn how to deal with setting up chassis, and you move your way up. You don't get in a hurry to jump 2 or 3 classes at a time. Learn your craft, and then when you do move up to the next level, you can apply that craft, and a great job he's doing right now. And you see the difference between the GTDX machine, the Ferrari there, the 2.0.
That's
we'll talk more about that in just a second. In the GSX category, and it really gives you an idea of how good a job Stephen Clemens is doing right now, rolling that speed through that high-speed Le Mans chicane.
Even with this LMP3 that's coming through, it's not really reeling them in hand over fist, is it? So, yeah, these guys at the front of the GSX field are driving these cars extremely well. This is 2nd and 3rd within that class. How about a Ferrari battle? This is for 3rd and 4th in class with Matias Perez Compact and AJ Muss, another one who's recovering and was probably pretty happy to see the full course yellow.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I know you and I talked about this yesterday, AJ Muss, and the improvement that he has made over the last several years, the different classes that he has run, TCR and Michelin Pilot Challenge, Lamborghini Super Trofeo, last couple of seasons, and now here. But another driver, the driver leading this pack, the 32 of Kyle Washington, same deal. I was talking to James Safronis, his team owner, yesterday, and he was saying what a great job Kyle has done with focusing this year. He's always had the ability to make the car go fast, but his focus on his racecraft and really the strategy that comes with it is what is really setting him apart from years past. And you see the performance on the racetrack right now under very difficult conditions. He's doing a super job.
Got an off-road racing background, so he's okay if the car's swerving around underneath him. He's perfectly comfortable in that situation, and won a GT3 race at VIR last year. That was a big deal for Kyle Washington in his development. Battle for the lead closing in. How about this? The lead was up around 1.7 seconds last lap. It's now 0.7 of a second as the veteran Marcus Palmer, 2-time Prototype Cup Germany champion, is reeling in his teammate in one of those championships, Valentino Catalano.
So yesterday, we will remember that Palmer had that 10-second penalty for the improper starting procedure, and you and I were discussing whether the fact that Catalino might let him go, because for Valentino, I mean, he was still going to win the race because his teammate was going to have a 10-second penalty, but what was important was to get Palmer 10 seconds in front of the third place car so that they could finish 1-2. And he goes, I was talking to him this morning, and Catalano said, well, the team told me to feel comfortable going ahead and racing. So I heard that, and I just focused forward. I said, and at that point you unplugged your radio so you didn't have to hear any other messages throughout the race. And he goes, no, but I took that one to heart and was like, yeah, you can go race.
Yeah, and it did cost Palmer, because ultimately he did lose the second spot to Brady Golan. And actually, that's a story we haven't covered off yet. Golan only credited with turning 2 laps in this race. And so after that stunning drive to get from the back of the pack at LMP3 all the way up to second, ultimately after the penalty was factored in yesterday, he also had the fastest race lap yesterday to Brady Golan. So you hate to see him drop out as he did early in the going here today.
On his debut in a prototype, he was super quick, consistent all weekend long, had that good race. So obviously some type of mechanical issue, I would say. And for Marcus Palmer, not letting Valentino Catalano get away by any stretch of the imagination. Last time by the line, 3/4 of a second again. We'll see. I think it's closer this time.
Oh, certainly so. Look at that purple Duquesne closing in on the teammate, on the leader. 0.4 of a second. It's been halved again as Palmer closes in on Catalano. Oh, but he hits the white line and around he goes.
He's reeling him in, and he can feel it. Look at this, a little push and shove. And actually, they didn't touch it. But Benedetto wide there.
Jackson Lee making the pass. Great run for
Good
Jackson,
job.
who has never raced a sports car in the rain before.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and he's up in podium contention after a really difficult day yesterday, but just with some misfortunes, some things that didn't go his way. Palmer's still pushing. You're telling him to calm down, though.
Just settle down. I mean, he's frustrated with himself, for sure. And again, I'm wondering about tires. He gets there into turn one that time. I think you called it right, Ryan. I think he gets in there kind of hot. He's fighting for control of the car. Then he hits the white line, and that's
all she wrote.
It.
Well, let's take a look and see if what we saw at first blush is right. Seems pretty straightforward. Yeah, he's kind of higher than he wants to be, trying to get it slowed down. And as soon as he gets to that white line, gets to that paint, which fills in all the aggregate, super slick. The last place you want to be is on the paint anywhere when it's wet, and he hit that white line. You see the repercussions. For those that have never driven on a track in the wet, you might wonder, well, how big of a difference could it really be? But it's massive. Well, it's massive, and you know what? In your street car, you can experience the exact same thing. Pull up to an intersection with a crosswalk, and when you accelerate away in the rain across that crosswalk and you go across the paint, you'll find that you get some wheel spin. Look at this battle. Great move there by AJ. Muss takes the position from Kyle Washington. That was a power move. Yeah, that's up to third. I wonder what happened. We had Ferraris there. Oh, okay. I see. So that is Washington now dropping back to Muss. So Washington had fallen off of Perez Compact, as had Muss. So now Muss, there's Perez Compact just up the road. That's who he needs to target. By the way, lost in all of this is in GSX, Kiko Porto is dominating this race, and he has built his lead up over 10 seconds now, which is where it needs to be because he's got that penalty coming. Oh, another spin for Palmer in the same corner. That's let Woolridge through. That's for position. Yeah, that is for position. And now the 77 of Brian Thenis right there as well. Well, it just goes to show how difficult that corner is in these conditions, especially if these cars are trimmed out, as we were speculating earlier. But just wanted to clarify, as long as there's not a full course yellow to bunch the field back up, Kiko Porto, despite that penalty, is in a position to win this race. Patrick Beaumont slipping back now in his number 12 BMW to Gregory Eliafuz, that Mustang out of Stephen Cameron Racing. They're having a good go of it. And I'm thinking right now that these rain tires are starting to protest a little bit. I'm going to believe, because in talking with Marcus Palmer, we talked about tire degradation on the rear of the Duquesne with the racing slick. But as this track is dried, you would think that the personality of the chassis would be the same. And if he's beginning to get that tire degradation on the rain tires in the rear now, corner entry especially can be challenging. Whoa, something broke on the front of Clemens' car. We just saw it pop off, and he goes straight on into oval turns 1 and 2. Something very strange just happened right as we cut to it. Yeah, I mean, you could see the damage there on the right front fender, and I don't know that it is going to matter anyway as he's down onto the apron, but if you go straight in turn 1 and rejoin at 6, you've lost the lap. And I don't, like I said, I don't think it's going to matter because of the issue that he had, but that was dramatic. It was very strange. Hopefully we'll get a look at that again here in a moment. Catalano now finds himself unpressured for the first time all weekend, just out in front on a cruise. However, he's got some traffic to contend with looming just up the road, and that's going to make things more complicated. Back to your conversation about the wet weather tires. Notice no rooster tails off these cars anymore, and that's typically a sign in a longer race that it's about time to start thinking about slick tires. Catalano and Palmer both
when I was speaking to him. Just a little slight spray there in the lower speed sections. You might see that. See how he's offline? He needs to be. He's got another car coming up. But you can see the difference between the spray when he's offline. And that's not a bad place to be. If these rain tires are beginning to overheat, finding moisture anywhere is going to help cool them down. And any little bit that you can cool them down, that's exactly what you want to do. But in talking to both of those guys yesterday, Palmer and Catalano, they said our tires began to go away, pressures came up, and the cars were a handful. I've got to believe that's what Marcus Palmer is dealing with. And in fact, when I watched Catalano into turn one that time, the car just seems to be up on its tiptoes. Now, Clemens is on the apron. They're down in Speedway 1, stalled on the side of the racetrack, just inside 5 minutes to go. Do you leave him there or do you go full course caution to get him? And what would that do to Kiko Porto?
Well, considering, too, they're both Toyota drivers, Toyota teams, you would think that maybe the message would come in from the Toyota folks, hey, find a way to get someplace safe. I'm going to turn the question back on you, though.
You've
worn the race control hat before. I have not. What would you do with 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes to go?
I'd leave him there. He's safe. I mean, in my opinion, down on the apron, cars are accelerating by. It's not in a heavy braking zone. And in fact, typically if a car would have a problem, the centripetal force would move it up and out of the way and not down onto the apron. I think that he's in a safe place. I would tell the team we're at 4 minutes to go. He's going to just tell him to stay in the car and be comfortable. We're going.
You know who disagrees with you? The fine folks at CSM.
Well, yeah,
and Jackson Lee,
who's in second.
And because of the penalty to Porto, that would put him in a position to get his first ever sports car racing win, his first win in anything since 2020 in F1600. I think they're begging for a full course yellow.
You think?
I do.
But what a great job by Jackson Lee. This weekend did not start out the way they wanted to. They had some problems in the first practice session. Didn't really get the laps in that he wanted. And then in second practice session, it went a little bit better. He improved. Then in the race, car wasn't as balanced as they wanted it to be. And they really were thinking coming into this race, we think we've made some changes. We think we have a better car. He also ran out of fuel yesterday on the cool down lap. That shouldn't be an issue today. But that team has persevered. He has persevered. And they've done a great job. He finds himself in second, as you pointed out earlier, in the first sports car race he's ever done in the wet.
First time he's ever had a windscreen in front of him in the rain. It's much different in a closed cockpit car compared to the open wheel cars that he's raced in the rain plenty in before. Battle on again for second. Marcus Palmer, like Sisyphus, pushing the rock up the hill, only for it to roll back down. Here he comes back through the field, trying to navigate this traffic.
See, and this is where he's got to be patient. What he knows is that Duquesne is quicker on the high banks and the fast sections of this racetrack than the Ligier. And he got down on the more damp portion of the racetrack, the brake zone there. He did the right thing. He kind of gave it up because he knows he's got time to get it, and he knows where the advantage is that he has.
Right, he knows this section of the track right here is where the Duquesne package seems to be the strongest in the straight line, and this is no contest, just higher top-end speed. Good run through the chicane, that's where it starts, but then able to make this move.
But
now,
he's got to go through turn one now.
Can he get it woe down and not run wide, stay off the white line? And this time it looks like he's able to get the job done, so that's Palmer back up to second.
But I'm telling you, I think both Catalano and Palmer have their hands full. The Duquesnes are working great on the high-speed sections of the racetrack, but I think they've got their hands full, especially in the braking zone in the middle of turn one. Both of those cars look like they're up on their tiptoes. And you look at Woolridge right now through the infield, the advantage that Palmer had when they were on the high banks is not nearly as exaggerated on the infield right now. The Ligier working a little bit better than the Duquesne in the tighter sections of the racetrack. But again, the checkered flag awaits well around the high banks here at Daytona. So I know which car I'd rather be in.
Pretty clearly, it is the fast package to have, but it is hard to hang on to. That's what makes what Catalano has done all the more impressive. He had his little moment as well, let's not forget. Briefly lost the lead, but got it right back less than half a lap later.
Valentino Catalano across the line, looking for the white flag, and he will indeed get it. Should be the last lap. And what we're looking at here, I'll call it a three-peat, Ryan. Valentino Catalano, Adam Adelson right now, and Kiko Porto. Those are the three leaders in the three different classes. They were our winners yesterday. But one of the things that you and I have found out today is that drama can be in any corner around this racetrack, because we've seen a lot of the leaders kind of have some drama throughout this race. It's not over until it's over.
I can strike at the most unexpected time, as we saw for poor Stephen Clemens yesterday when he crawled to a halt on the final lap, just a few hundred yards short of the start-finish line, and ultimately got a 10th place finish on a day when he could very well have won. And then especially on a day like today, with the track as treacherous as it's proven to be, you can't take anything for granted, even here with less than a lap to go.
So you pack up your bag, you get your helmet, you get your suit, you put it on an airplane, you fly halfway across the world to a renowned racing facility as a 19-year-old. You come through that tunnel, you look around. He said to me this morning, he goes, it was like the movie Cars, you know, when they're in there and all the flash bulbs are going off and they're in the stadium. He said, that's what I felt like yesterday. He had the win there. What would 2 for 2 be like for this young man?
It's hard to imagine, hard to put it into words, to come to a place like Daytona, which almost defies description. How do you describe this place as someone who's not been here before, and to come out, as it appears he's about to, with a couple of wins to take back to Germany? That is a remarkable trip for the 19-year-old.
This is where the drivers have to be careful. You see the stalled car of the 76. You saw the yellow flag back in the apex. They cannot pass until they get past that stalled car, but you saw those cars jockeying for positions there. Prototype, I'm sure they're going to kind of look at that and let that go, but as a driver, you've got to pay attention. We said it's not over until it's over. You can't get caught out by making a mistake. I'll tell you what, Valentino Catalano is showing me a lot right now. He had that GSX car in front that if this had been the first or second lap of the race, he would have gone inside that car into the braking zone of the Le Mans chicane. He did not. The 19-year-old is growing up. He is mature. He is making good decisions. And in front of him waits the checkered flag. 2 races at the World Center of Racing for Valentino Catalano. And in each one of those, he'll take home the checkered flag. Gebhardt, Valentino Catalano, they will celebrate again in VP Racing SportsCar Challenge at Daytona.
Marcus Palmer closed in within 2 seconds, but it wasn't enough. Meanwhile, Adam Adelson, who's not scheduled to do any more of these VP races after this weekend, that might change as he sweeps the weekend at Daytona International Speedway. Adam Adelson, Wright Motorsports, victorious 2 days in a row.
The weight of that 10-second post-race penalty is weighing on Kiko Porto right now, I would say, aboard the number 8 from Rafa Racing, that Toyota Supra. He needs 10 seconds over Jackson Lee. Where does it stand right now? He's got it. He's got it, and he too will make it 2 for 2 at Daytona. Rafa Racing coming into this weekend, I shouldn't say he's got it. He's got a quarter of a lap yet to go, but Rafa Racing comes into VP Racing SportsCar Challenge, and they have made their presence known. And for this young man with a Formula Car background and then Lamborghini Super Trofeo last year, steps in to VP Racing SportsCar Challenge, steps aboard this GSX Toyota Supra. It shows that he can get it done in just about anything that he pedals. The number 8, the Toyota Supra. Toyota, Kiko Porto, Rafa Racing, they win at Daytona.
Picture-perfect start to the season for Kiko Porto. And how about Rafa Racing? If Ian Porter can hang on, he took the 3rd spot from De Benedetto a couple of laps ago. It could be a double podium for Rafa Racing in this new partnership they have with the old Smooge team.
Hey, look at these stories from this weekend. First of all, the big story, 3 classes this year, and it did not disappoint.
No, absolutely not. I think this is exactly what the rules makers hoped they would see with the addition of GTDX. It's another category, brings some fresh blood into the series, brings some established teams into the series. And the way the 3 classes interacted, it was just a ton of fun all throughout both races here this weekend. In the rain, in the dry, it didn't matter. That bodes well for the rest of 2025.
Yeah, and some standout performances. I'm looking at Jackson Lee right now in GSX. We talked about that. He had a 6th place finish yesterday, climbs to 2nd today in his first ever sports car race in the rain. Like you said, first time behind a windscreen in racing in the rain. For Adam Adelson, championship winning driver in other forms of sports car racing and SRO, and brings that championship form into the IMSA paddock with his team. They ran here last year. IMSA WeatherTech said, hey, we like this, and you can see why. I don't know that you let a championship, I mean, if you just win 2 races, do you let a championship go, or do you stay in it for the long haul? We'll have to wait and see. Here's a look at the unofficial results right now. Valentino Catalano, Marcus Palmer, they repeat from their performances yesterday. Good runs there, and we were just talking about Adam Adelson. But more stories as you look back into the GSX category as well, where Toyota was so strong this weekend.
Certainly were. 2 cars in the top 3. They were outstanding yesterday in the dry. They were almost in a class of their own. Maybe call them GT 3.5.
I was going to say, Stephen McAleer sent me a text and said, make sure you call the Toyota Supra a GT3 car. I don't think they were quite that fast. But,
no.
You know, everybody likes to kind of pick and prod a little bit here and there. But great runs for everybody. Disappointing, obviously, for Brady Golan after a great run yesterday. Mirko Schultes had his problem. Great to see him climb out of his car. And then Jake Walker with the mechanical issue that sidelined him early on. Disappointing there, but we've got more to go.
We do indeed. Looking forward to what's coming up next this season and everything else that's still to come. Just fantastic start to the year. And for many drivers, this is just the beginning of their Daytona experience this year, whether it's still to come in Michelin Pilot Challenge or in the big show, the Rolex 24. That's where we'll see this man next week.
Adam Adelson takes the victory here, but he's looking forward. He's going to take these lessons, I would think, and he's going to apply them as they look to the Rolex 24, the crown jewel of endurance racing here in North America. And what a great WeatherTech series we have ahead of us as far as the endurance events go. But 2 weekend trips to Victory Lane at Daytona International Speedway.
Wow, fantastic performance. And then you think about what's coming up still on the schedule this year for VP Racing SportsCar Challenge. Circuit of the Americas, home of the U.S. Grand Prix, Mid-Ohio, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, VIR, and Michelin Raceway Road, Atlanta. Just a fantastic schedule and a great way to get it started here in Florida.
Tell you what, the addition of the GTDX category, I think, is just kind of redefined this series. It was so good last year, and it makes it even better this year. And celebrations all around there for Valentino Catalano for his victory. Race 2 in the books, but a championship with still a long way to go. The 3 different classes here, the racing has been spectacular. And like you would expect in motorsport, there's some heartache, some heartburn, and a lot of celebration. Thanks for joining us, everybody. The next one from Circuit of the Americas. Brian Hill for Ryan Marine will bring you all the action all season long. Make sure you join us.